Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Let's do today the map update and cover some of the news that escaped the headlines a little bit too much in my perspective. And we're gonna do a video about the other topics later this week. So good for you, more videos from me. The hottest point right now is actually all across the front line. We are now, as I explained to you many videos before, we are now again in a cycle where Russians have regrouped and now they're attacking again at Ukrainian forces. The most difficult situation is in Avdiivka because here, after two major operations, Russians are finally succeeding in their goals towards Avdiivka. Now, they're not doing it fast, the situation is not yet critical, but it's pretty much getting there, because I explained to you that there are certain key points, and one of those key points was not taken, but effectively Russians were able to work around it and essentially achieve what they needed to achieve to establish themselves at the north of Avdiivka. So now this whole grouping of Ukrainian forces are now in a little bit of a pincer movement right over here. And Ukrainians are fighting. We're receiving good news both for Ukrainians capturing and fighting Russians back, both on the south and on the north front lines. There are videos coming out of Ukrainians counterattacking, taking some of the Russian captives. But the situation here is bad. Ukrainians are again running very low on shells. It's constantly reporting that the ammunition is not being supplied in necessary quantities, and this is what we can expect, right? This is what we hope to expect. Losing Avdiivka is definitely not going to be as irrelevant as losing of Bakhmut was. So Avdiivka is definitely something that, if it would be possible, there should be kept. However, the situation is definitely getting to the point where withdrawal would not be unjustified. I really believe by this point the plans for withdrawal already should be considered. However, I'm not in command. I don't know the full situation on the front line in details, and it's for the commanders to understand how much resources they have, how much resources they can spend, and how long they want to be in the city. All in all, the battle for Avdiivka is continuing. Ukrainians are able to do some pushbacks around the northern side of Avdiivka and generally kind of hold the line. But we should not be surprised if in the coming month or so, Avdiivka pocket will be withdrawn from Ukrainian forces. I don't expect any kind of collapse or encirclement of Ukrainian troops. This is not something that we've been seeing happen before. They still have plenty of fortification in the area, but definitely something we should be aware of. As I explain again, don't worry. Losing of Avdiivka, while it's not going to be nice and it does give away some certain good positions, it's not the end of the war, and Ukraine still have plenty of time and resources to fight Russians. We see that Ukrainians right now, in the last couple of days, they've conducted their counter strikes around against Russians in the area of Ivanivske. They were able to retake some of the lost positions before. However, as I explained now, Russians finally regrouped, and as we are speaking right now, it's the Russians that are attacking back towards Ivanivske. The situation is also not difficult. I mean, it is difficult. The fighting is always difficult. You ask a person on the front line, it's always going to be crazy difficult. So, but situation around Klishivka is being controlled right now, despite Russian attempts on taking it over. All in all, right now, there is no obvious threat to the Bakhmut area here. There is no salient. Reminder that all of the fight on Bakhmut axis is uphill for Russians. Every next village, every next defensive positions for Ukrainians is going to be harder and harder and harder for Russians. It's not going to be easier the more they go in depth. It's going to be getting harder and harder. Additionally, there is some pressure reported around the area of Terny by Russians. And right now, reports are that Russians, and yes, I'm pretty sure you've heard this before, they are now once again storming Sinkivka. The only thing about this direction is that right now there has appeared a new discussion that Russia has amassed over 500 tanks and like thousands of men to attack into this direction. And I just want to make sure that you understand that it's not that it's like at one place, it's distributed along this front line over here at the top. And it's not that this amount of equipment is something new. There are some new forces, some new equipments that Russia is sending, but it's not that it was unexpected or it's some kind of amount that Ukraine was not prepared for. So take it with a grain of salt. Don't be buying into the large numbers and quantities and the scary factor. Oh my God. Take it like this. Yes, thousands of Ukrainian drones are awaiting them. So breathe out. Ukraine is doing fine. They're doing the best they can with the resources that they're having. And resources is the name of the game. The more we kind of go into the resources and what resources Ukraine has, the more we try to see how Ukraine is defending themselves. And one of the major defense factors that Ukraine is having is drones. And the thing about drones, the first thing about drones, is that what was considered to be Ukrainian weakness, as we can see in long term, is turning in a complete Ukrainian more of a power play in a drone warfare. Because what happened? Russia has started mass producing a lot of drones. They had the competition of who should be producing drones for the military, and they selected one or two production units. And then they mass produced drones for the Russian military. And at that moment, everyone reported that Russia now is going to have significant advantage of drones because their production are through the roof. However, as it turned out, when half of your military is running the same model of drones, using the same frequencies to fly that drone, then it means that the enemy side just can very easily adapt specifically to the conditions your drones is used for. Whereas Ukrainian side, it has a lot of small businesses that are producing these drones, smaller factories. One thing is done because Ukrainian government was not seeing drones as a priority. This is a new doctrine of warfare. It's only developed in the last year. And we talked about this about General Zaluzhny's article. But secondly, because of the ability of Russians to strike pretty much anywhere in Ukraine, then having any kind of a big production facility is probably a no-no, that it would instantly become a target for Russians. Therefore, having a lot of these like distributed businesses, that's great. And that allows a whole plethora of variants of drones that Ukraine has available. And it allows to use drones, for example, that have not been used on certain directions. It allows to rotate drone types through different directions and therefore disabling the Russian ability to jam those drones because the frequencies that one drones are flying on are, for example, not used by other drones. And this allows for a better use. So in a nutshell, while Russia maybe in general, in a mass production, gets the quantity of drones larger, when we're talking about the effectiveness and efficiency of drones and its use on the front line, Ukraine is absolutely taking the cake. And now we see that this distributed network of drone producers is becoming an absolute dominant force in this warfare. Especially when we're talking about drones and talking about successful Russian drones, we cannot escape something that was called Lancet drones. So Lancet drones are a larger type of drones. Think about like a Javelin warhead, like a Javelin missile, except it's a drone, so it flies like tens of kilometers beyond the enemy lines. And when it strikes a target, the target, even if it's armored, explodes with a big explosion. Really nasty thing. And it's been a problem for Ukrainians for a while. However, what I always explain to you that in military and in war, whenever there is a problem, it's only a temporary problem. The problems in military warfare always find solutions. And here we see Ukrainians. Well, first the solutions were just using the nets around their artillery, and that helped a lot against the Lancet drones. But now Ukrainians have developed new technology. What we're seeing here essentially is a scanner. It scans the air for specific frequencies Lancet drones are being used on. So if they're seeing an activity on these frequencies in the area, it gives an early warning notification about these drones flying in the area. So what I would expect is that at some point someone will take this piece of equipment, and then the one that guy holding is in hand, then stick it on some drone and then fly it up high, and we essentially are gonna see an sort of an AWACS of drone warfare. I am predicting, I don't know, but it's quite possible. And Ukrainians are innovating, and that's what makes Ukrainian army strong: the innovation, the capabilities, the adaptability. One of the major things, I'm not sure if you know or not, but when there was a fight for the Snake Island, a big question was how Ukraine was able to target Snake Island while it was in the middle of the sea. And I know there was a discussion that Ukraine used some of the artillery pieces. Well, they not only used that, but they also reproduced the meme, if you saw, with a rubber boat and then the HIMARS on that rubber boat shooting at the Crimean Bridge. But basically here they just took a multiple missile launch system and they put it on a boat and they shot at the Russian positions in the middle of the sea. Absolutely amazing, and I'm really glad to see that Ukrainians are having this adaptability. Now, Zelensky has said that Ukraine needs a lot of adaptability, and the situation have changed, right? It's a whole new discussion about whether or not Zaluzhny is going to be removed. While there are things that suggest that he will, I am not going to be completely saying that it's possible, because what Zelensky meant in his interview that's being quoted by everyone is to talk general about the governance of Ukrainian machine. He didn't exclude Zaluzhny, but it's a whole another conversation which I would like to have maybe in another video. In this case, we need to look at what Zelensky did already and what's already happening. One of the major names that I think we should learn is Alexander Commission. Now, Alexander Commission, or in Ukrainian, Alexander Commission, Alexander Commission is a manager, a top manager, and he was in charge of Ukrainian railways at the start of the war. This is the person that has been responsible to restructure, readapt, and make sure that Ukrainian railways are able to work during the absolutely disastrous campaign of Russians from the beginning, and also to become the backbone of the Ukrainian logistics that it needed to be. This person now has been set by Zelensky to be the Minister of Strategic Industries. This is the person that is now put in charge to restructure how Ukrainian industry will work, specifically military industry and military production. All of the before components and adaptations that were happening in Ukrainian industry were mostly kind of scalability and building on the older components, like bringing back production of 152 millimeter Soviet style artillery ammunition, building up mortar ammunition. But the production effectiveness was not as high as everyone hoped, to be honest. So when we're talking about having this guy now in charge, then there is a lot of things to say. There is an interview. Maybe I'm going to make a read through the interview, because I was surprised by the response to my reading through the Zaluzhny's article. But Alexander Commission is definitely an interesting person to keep track of. And I believe this is the person that's going to build the factories that are going to produce the weapons that Ukraine will use to defeat Russia. He already stated that he is interested in one very specific performance indicator, which is cost to kill by the weapons. What he's stating specifically, we have certain weapons that do certain capabilities. For example, we have an anti-tank weapon of Stugna, absolutely amazing anti-tank weapon. It does incredible job. However, one shot of that weapon costs about like $30,000-ish. I don't know the precise price, so don't quote me on that. But as an example, whereas an FPV drone could cost somewhere around $1,000, which makes it almost 30 times more efficient at essentially securing kills. One FPV, for example, can kill 1 to 2 people by its strike, whereas Stugna might kill 3 people that are inside of a vehicle. So there's a lot of these calculations that can be made. Like, these are not actual calculations. I'm just giving an example for you here. And he is stating that we need to be cost efficient in what we are producing, and we need to be cost efficient in what kind of weapons we are delivering. Ukraine is on a very tight budget. He's very realistic about what kind of weapons the Ukraine is able to produce. And the key doctrine that Zelensky wants this guy to achieve is self-sufficiency. I told you about 2 years of Ukraine to setting up their production. And this is the guy that's going to be doing it. And I will be following very, very closely. And I recommend you following this channel to make sure you follow it as well. But if we're talking about artillery, then I want to recommend you the video by Covered Cabal. I'm going to have a link in description and the first comment. And Covered Cabal is an amazing analyst, because what he and HIMARS, another guy from the platform Shitter, what they're doing is they're getting pictures, they're buying satellite images of the Russian bases, and they're physically counting all of the pieces of equipment that are located on these bases. And in his latest video, they did a count of artillery. And what he said at the end, like to TLDR, firstly watch his video, but in a short, is that Russia still has the same kind of situation as it has with all of the other equipment. For at least a year and a half, Covered Cabal mentions 2 years, but it's given that all of the artillery is going to be used and everything that they saw is a working piece of artillery. I don't really believe that, just because from what I'm seeing of what's being delivered to the front lines already. But at least a year and a half, Russia has the ability to fight this war comfortably with enough supplies. Again, Ukraine right now is fighting against Russia, not against Russia, but against the 50 years of Soviet Union, world's superpower, accumulating weapons to fight another superpower. Now it has fallen on Ukrainian shoulders to defeat all of that legacy. And that legacy is large and extensive. So when we say that Russians are fighting like idiots, that are commanded by idiots, what we're saying is not that the Russian army is not threatening, not that it's not dangerous. It is. What I'm saying is that if they would have a competent command and competently approach with the resource they would have, then Ukraine would not stand a chance. But yet Ukraine does, and it perseveres, and it finds a way. But Ukrainian partners are also trying hard, specifically Czech Republic. With the European Union now struggling to meet their promised deadline by March to deliver 1 million shells, Czech Republic says that they have found 450,000 artillery shells outside of EU, and now they're pressuring EU representatives to work to purchase these 450,000 shells. There is a little bit of opposition from the French weapons manufacturers, which I think is a little bit silly, because while French manufacturers are great, the numbers that they are providing for the production of artillery shells are not even in a ballpark to match what Czech Republic are proposing here. This is the latest news, so I'm expecting there will be an agreement to get those shells to Ukraine, which would be a huge and momentary help. Besides that, we know that European Union has agreed on a 50 billion long-term support for Ukraine, and some of the people said, well, Georgie, but a lot of that money is non-military, so that means it's something that will not help Ukraine fight Russia. It's just, to support the economic activity. Firstly, war and economics very intertwined. That's the first thing. Second thing, the fact that Ukraine can support its economy with the funds from EU, that means that it can divert more of its own money towards military purchases, increase of military productions, etc., etc. So it's kind of by proxy, it still helps even militarily. And to round it all off, again, a message from the European Union is that Joseph Borrell is really urging the European Union member states to cut off on weapon exports and instead export these weapons to Ukraine to make sure that we get the weapons and artillery and ammunition, everything that Ukraine needs as fast as possible. What I'm saying is Europe is stepping up increasingly well, and I have things to say about what's happening in US, but this video must end and I will talk about it maybe next time. Thank you so much for watching this, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you That next time.